By the 1990s, the relationship between the team and paper was more arm's length, more professional, and more crowded. As the Packers returned to success after years of failure, other media became interested in the team. That was nothing compared to what would happen after the birth of the internet, and 3 more trips to the Super Bowl.
When I started on the beat in 1974, there was no security here. I could walk in the front door, I could walk up and knock on the door of an assistant coach, and there were days I was the only reporter here at practice in the locker room. Then I remember I went in, I covered baseball for a while, and all of a sudden I came back when they started winning in the 90s, and I think one day, like the first day at camp, there were more than 75 media members at practice. So it went from 1 to hordes.
In the early years of the Packers, it was newspapers and radio stations, newspaper probably, and radio stations covering the team. Today, the competition is enormous. You have places like ESPN having dedicated reporters. You have things like Packer Report and The Athletic, and radio stations from Milwaukee and Green Bay and all over the state, and TV stations from Green Bay and Milwaukee and all over the state. And now you have the Packers themselves as competition for information with Packers.com, their website. Now, one of the differences with how the Packers cover themselves is they really can't cover it the same way we do.
This is where the NFL.com and NFL Network walk a fine line. As you know, there are certain things that people expect, but you're not going to really undermine the teams, and certainly our own website. But we try. I do think that we can provide some insight and access that maybe others can't have. Features on players, things of that nature.
Fans, I think, are a little skeptical. I think that they would look to the rest of the media. They look to PackersNews.com for more of a true analysis. I don't think you're going to have someone at Packers.com calling for, maybe a coach should get fired. That's not the sort of thing you would expect from that site. That critical and really unbiased analysis is what you would expect from Pete Doherty or Ryan Wood or guys like that.
I feel as though we give all of that. We have a large team covering the Packers from all angles, including on the field, off the field, video, writing. I think we've tried to cover the team in its entirety, even its impact on the community and the state, more so than anybody else.
You cannot be a fan. You need to distance. To do this job, you need to be distant from emotions. You can't let that affect the way you see things. And if anyone ever did the job, they would quickly realize that it would be hard to be a fan and do the job anyway. It would squash any desire to be a fan out of you. Once you see how the sausage is made, it changes the way you view things. And then when you've had run-ins with people in the organization, which is inevitable because there's an adversarial aspect to the relationship, that also helps create a little more of that distance too. There's a lot at stake with players' careers and money and championships and egos. So it's a really interesting job, but it is a job, and some of the romanticism that you have when you're younger is lost.
I think we're kind of unique compared to papers in other markets. Not only do the writers have to come up with a story every day, it's usually not on the front page of not only the sports section, it's on the front page of the paper. In Washington, New York, and LA, it's different, and so I think I'm sympathetic to the fact that they need to come up with something every day. When you're in a smaller market, we don't have the same. There's not, from a news standpoint or a sports standpoint, there's not the competition. You're kind of the only game in town, and there's more coverage.
When we would go reach towards a Super Bowl, and we'd be heading on a Super Bowl path, you'd start to see national advertisers who would reach out to us because they knew that we were the local, news media, local newspaper, and that was their way to connect with Packers fans, was through the Press-Gazette.
Packers sell newspapers. They have sold newspapers since 1919, for sure 1921. and they still sell newspapers today.
The Packers have to admit that they need the Press-Gazette. I mean, I always felt that way. No matter where you are, your hometown newspaper is a key for you.
We used to have one product a day, and it appeared on your doorstep at 6 a.m. and the news in that newspaper was at least 6 or 7 or 8 hours old, probably older than that. Now we have the ability to give you news in real time as it's happening. We have the ability to give you video, which was pretty hard to do in a newspaper. All that was because of the internet revolution and our ability to adapt to that from a one-dimensional news source. We know that there are fans who see the Packers and the NFL as entertainment strictly, and others who see it as almost life and death. Our future is about making sure that we're serving all of those audiences as best we can.